make of today's hearing?
Well, first of all, the hearing was absolutely historic. A lot of people, after the 180-day report came out to Congress back some time ago in June, they were underwhelmed, not realizing the intent of that report. And actually, we are where we are today with the hearings because of that report. I think people will look back and realize that this hearing was historic. I also think we can expect more hearings. I think this hearing laid a basic foundation to what the U.S. government plan of attack is regarding this topic. There were no huge revelations other than we don't know. There were some key findings I found very interesting. One, it appears that the U.S. government still considers this not just an air safety issue, but an air clutter, perhaps space junk issue. And they're not really grasping the notion of breakaway technology yet. And if they are, they're certainly not having that conversation publicly. But I am encouraged by they were talking about quite openly about working with our closest allies and friends on the international side. So you're talking, who is that? Well, it's the Five Eyes relationship. It's Canada, the UK, Australia, New Zealand. I'm very encouraged by that. I'm surprised that they mentioned that, quite frankly, because there's still a lot of countries that don't want to have this discussion publicly. But it is in the law now, certainly here in the United States, we must engage with our allies.
You have talked to some Canadian politicians about this. And I guess from the Canadian viewpoint from Mr. Maguire is he feels that Canada's not taking this as seriously as the United States.
Well, with all due respect to Mr. Maguire, I certainly wouldn't want to speak on his behalf. But what I will say is I believe he shares the same frustration that our lawmakers here in the United States have. And that is, there is obviously something in our skies. Northern Manitoba is a perfect example. You have a lot of incidents up there. In fact, you also have a very interesting relationship between Canada and the U.S. You have, for example, NORAD, which is actually the deputy director is a Canadian. So you have this shared concern over our northern tier, and it seems like neither government within our defense departments and intelligence communities really want to have the conversation. It's not that they're not seeing things, because they are. The problem is that they're not really saying much about it. And I think from Mr. Maguire's perspective, that's very frustrating. As a lawmaker, you are expected by your constituents to represent their concerns. And when information doesn't get to the right people at the right time, then you have a breakdown. And Mr. Maguire is absolutely correct in his concern, because he knows these reports do occur. I know for a fact that there are members of the Canadian military that have reported these incidents in the past, and it doesn't seem to go anywhere.
Just back to the hearing today, what were the things that you would have liked to have heard on the record?
We're establishing a baseline here. I think what's happening is that Congress is beginning to build a box around DOD, acknowledging that it's real, that it's important, it's a national security issue. And then through follow-on hearings, I think more details are going to be forthcoming. They don't even have a director yet. They just now announced the new director for this new capability. They've got a lot of homework to do. I'm not surprised, but I am a little disappointed that they didn't provide Congress more recent accounts. They're showing some old videos that have been out now on the internet for a while. That's not really helpful. I think what they need to do is share with Congress some of the videos that I'm privy to and that have been collected by U.S. military platforms as recently as a week and a half ago. With a lot of fidelity. These aren't just little balls of light on the horizon. There's something to it.
Are you willing to go on the record that this is otherworldly, this technology, that it's not the Chinese, it's not the Russians?
I will say, if I am asked to testify, I will gladly do so. We know it's not our technology. In fact, they admitted it. I actually wrote down the quote here, the blue on blue force. They know it's not our technology, and they admitted it. They're pretty sure it's not adversarial. Now, if we want to say drones and quadcopters to help ease into the conversation, well, that's certainly their call. But I think people will begin to realize that drones and quadcopters don't fly at 35,000 feet in supersonic speeds. That's just.
And then what we've gleaned from it. Here it is.
One such incident allegedly occurred at Malmstrom Air Force Base, in which 10 of our nuclear ICBMs were rendered inoperable. At the same time, a glowing red orb was observed overhead. I'm not commenting on the accuracy of this. I'm simply asking you whether you're aware of it and whether you have any comment on the accuracy of that report.
Let me pass that to Mr. Bray. You've been looking at UAPs over the last 3 years.
That data is not within the holdings of the UAP task force.
Okay, but are you aware of the report? or that the data exists somewhere?
I have heard stories. I have not seen the official data on that.
So you've just seen informal stories, no official assessment that you've done or exists within DOD that you're aware of regarding the Malmstrom incident?
All I can speak to is, what's within my cognizance, the UAP task force, and we have not looked at that incident.
Well, I would say, it's a pretty high-profile incident. I don't claim to be an expert on this, but that's out there in the ether. You're the guys investigating it. Who else is doing it?
If something was officially brought to our attention, we would look at it. There are many things that are out there in the ether that aren't officially brought to our attention.
So how would it have to be officially brought to your attention? I'm bringing it to your attention.
Sure,
this is pretty official.
Sure. So we'll go back and take a look at it, but generally there is some authoritative figure that says there is an incident that occurred. We'd like you to look at this. But in terms of just tracking what may be in the media that says that something occurred at this time, at this place, there are probably a lot of leads that we would have to follow up on. I don't think we are resourced to do that right now.
And for them to show that lame video when you can find all this other that's out there, and I've talked to Navy pilots that are in there at the same time, Navy pilot, and that's the kind of people you need to have in here for testimony.
That video seemed to be taken from an iPhone, from an F-18.
I don't know what. An iPhone, and we've got literally. We've got, I'm sorry, I keep pointing, I'm not mad at you all. When we have video from Navy pilots, from their wing cameras, for goodness sakes.
That seems
bring
to,
those guys in here.
Yeah, it seems to raise
talk.
a question if they've
and,
got...
And by telling you that they have, whistleblower protection or something, that's bogus until it's in the law. For us to just sit here and talk about it is bogus, and you really need to provide them with some sort of ability to come in here and not be persecuted and not have a blemish on their records.
They kept talking about 18 cases that seemed to baffle them and they didn't have explanations for. Would you like to see more?
I sure would. Transparency. I do not fear the American public knowing what we have. I would sure as heck like them to see it.
So did you learn anything today?
No, ma'am. I learned that I was correct and that the cover-up will continue.
Can you talk about the...
This was Congress painting a box around the Department of Defense and the intelligence community, saying, okay, what is the baseline of truth? What do we know? What don't we know? And what are you doing about it, right? Knowing full well Congress is very well informed. These guys are no fools. They've received the briefings. They know exactly what's going on. They've been talking to their constituents, former military members, current military members. They asked very, very good, very precise questions. Now, the response to those questions were very underwhelming. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. There was a lot of bureaucracy and political considerations that were discussed. And frankly, there were a lot of contradictions. I wrote down everything. And what I did is I went ahead and looked at all the things that they said, the things that they didn't say, and the contradictions. And I think the department is in a very precarious situation right now because they said a few things for the record that they can't take back. Let's hit those wave tops for a second, Ross.
Yeah.
The Wilson documents, something that I'm not at liberty to discuss, were submitted for the first time as public record. I wouldn't want to be in that hot seat right now. I know what I know,
yeah.
And I wouldn't want to touch that hot potato with a 10-foot pole. And yet here we are. It's part of now public record. Holy smokes, too, right? Second thing.
Just Lou, just for a moment, just for our audience, I'm just going to quickly explain to our audience. The Wilson documents record an alleged conversation between Dr. Eric Davis and Admiral Tom Wilson, the then recently retired director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, where Tom Wilson describes attempts that he purportedly made to discover a secret program inside the US Defense Department, which was hiding special access programs, code word programs that were concealing an alleged craft retrieval back engineering program. Correct?
That's what the document alleges. Congress now is looking at that. Now, that goes to a bigger point, Ross. Look.
Now, Lou, one thing that I want to ask you, when I first interviewed you last year, we talked about the quality of the videos that you've seen that you can't talk about. Now, that video that they showed last night, I know for a fact I've spoken to other people who've told me what they've seen in the Congress, in the private hearings. They've told me they've seen far higher resolution videos, better quality videos. Is this bullshit? Did they put up a completely bunkum, bogus, useless video?
It's happening every week. You know, they put something up from 2019, 2020, something that they knew was already out in social media, and people looked at it, and they could just go ahead and say, here's a video. No, show the real video. Show the videos that we know are there because I've seen them. Show the videos that you know are being reported almost on a weekly basis. Report those. If I had the opportunity right now, if you said, Lou, you have no more non-disclosure agreement to worry about, you can speak your mind, people would be blown away. And so this is my part of my kind of frustration. It actually makes me sad that the DOD is painting themselves into this corner because it makes them look incompetent. At the end of the day, the truth is coming out. Whether an undersecretary wants it or not, they, you know, look, undersecretaries, no offense, but you guys come and go. The citizenship doesn't. You know, citizens and concerned people don't. You know, this is what's important. So, you know, there's an old Bob Marley adage that goes, you can fool some people sometimes, but you can't fool all the people all the time. And that's what's going on. Look, Ross, you know what I've been through the last 4 years. When I came out, you know, it's the typical cycle of going through some sort of traumatic issue. First, you have disbelief and denial. Then the reaction when I came out, you know, we'll just ignore Lou. Then it goes to, well, anger, and we're going to go ahead and discredit the guy. You know, I mean, thank God I've got a letter from Harry Reid stating the record who I am, because if it was up to the Department of Defense, not only was ATIP didn't do anything to do with UFOs, which, by the way, that got cleared up today, finally, you know, but I had nothing to do with it. So these are the missteps that, from a strategic communication perspective, continue to happen. And it's breaking my heart because I was part of DOD. And
Luke, can I ask you this? I like Tom Wilson. I've exchanged communications with him. He's an honourable man. People speak very, very highly to me of Tom Wilson. My understanding is, though, and tell me if I'm wrong, if you are aware of a waived, unacknowledged special access program, something that's hidden, the darkest secrets of all in the US government, you're obliged to lie about them, aren't you?
It gets even worse because let's say hypothetically, and I'm just saying hypothetically here, if that document is legit, the way in which that document found its way to where it did, the FBI would probably launch immediately a full field counterintelligence investigation because that's not necessarily the orthodox way to capture those type of meeting minutes. And the fact that a conversation like that may have occurred, if it did occur, in a car, again, I'm being very careful what I say here, you know, there's a lot of people that have reason to be concerned. Now, does this happen every day? Yes, absolutely. People, these senior people that are going to sit there and try to turn the screws, they're guilty of it. They do it all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the backseat of a limousine or a car, and people are just having classified conversations, senior leadership. So it's a little bit disingenuous, but there's real reason to be concerned here. And I understand why, if there's legitimacy to that, and again, I'm being very careful here, if there's legitimacy to it, why a lot of people would be very concerned right now, because it could predicate a very intense criminal investigation.
It was Gallaher who said he wanted to put the Wilson memo in without objection, and nobody objected because I was pretty sure nobody knew what it was. I mean, do you think that he made that? Do you think that he made that statement and offered it into the record without anyone else knowing he was about to do it?
You know, it was clever if he did, but you know, I'm not surprised because DOD didn't know a lot of things. You know, Malmstrom, for example, right? When the response to Malmstrom was, "Well, we don't look at outside sources." Well, hold on a second. You're the source.
You're the source.
That was a DOD IIR written. You guys wrote it. It got released through FOIA. You had your own commanders coming up and telling you about it. What do you mean you don't talk to outside sources? You're the source. So I can't believe they were saying this for the record.
How does that happen? By the way? How does history get ignored to such a degree that you bring two people in? They know that they're going to have to testify before Congress. They're under oath, and they're not briefed and they're not up to date on the biggest cases. And if we're talking about national security, I think we've all agreed nuclear weapons are a national security issue with UFOs.
That's the crown jewels. The crown jewels, the nuclear triad. Absolutely.
How could they not know? How is it that that's happened on the inside that such a faux pas could actually occur?
Well, that's the bigger question. Are we talking about, it's one of two things. It's only one of two things. Either A, they're lying, or it's B, gross negligence. Right. Choose your poison. I don't really care. But both are not a good situation to be in if you are in the national security apparatus. And by the way, Congress already knows. So this is the kind of the big frustration that you see, like with Representative Tim Burchett. These guys aren't stupid. They already know the truth. And so when DOD comes out and they kind of do this soft sell, they don't realize Congress is painting a box around them, because the next time and the time after that and the time after that, there's more hearings, which, by the way, I'm thinking there will be. You're going to have more witnesses coming forward. And then they're going to contradict what was just said today, and someone's going to have to be held accountable, or hopefully they have another job by then.
They're giving us the message then. The message is we have this power, and we don't necessarily like the fact, I guess, that you have this nuclear arsenal, the United States, all the other
Not necessarily. I think we have to be careful on jumping to that conclusion. Look, if I may, just for a minute, Howard, and I do not want to push a threat narrative. I know a lot of people get very worried, and because I'm a national security guy or former national security guy, oh, there's a threat narrative. That's not the point. But if you look at this truly, objectively, and you say, okay, let's say that they're here and they're trying to disable, trying to dissuade us from using nuclear weapons. Well, what happened in 1945? My country vaporized 500,000 human beings, living souls, off the face of the planet with the dropping of bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Nowhere were UFOs there. In fact, nowhere were UFOs when we were testing them in the Nevada range, when China was testing, when Pakistan and when India were testing their nukes, when Russia was blowing them up in the atmosphere. Nowhere were there UFOs. There weren't UFOs there for World War II, the Korean War, or Vietnam. They weren't there for COVID. They weren't there for world hunger. There's very, very little evidence to suggest that whatever these are, they're here to help. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not. It just means that there's no obvious signs that they're here to help. Now, what we do see is obvious signs of surveillance. They are definitely interested in our military and our nuclear capabilities, and not just ours, other countries. So that we do see. But so the question is...
The question is, isn't it, and I'm sorry again, that clock is counting me down here, is whether once they've done the displays, they're going to one day do something. Do you think that's likely, just in a word?
Well, I think it's possible. I don't know if it's likely. I think it's possible. Because of that, we have to understand that anything that is, even if there's a remote possibility, anytime there's an asteroid and there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that asteroid could hit the Earth, it's still a possibility. We need to be prepared. We need to know, right? We need to know its trajectory. We need to know where it's going to be. That's just good governance. That's good. That's just due diligence. So I'm not opposed to that. I don't think we should let fear control us. I don't think we should let it drive our decision-making matrix. But I do think that it's a fair part of the equation.
Okay. A quick point I think can probably be dealt with fast, but let's see. Kay Costa emailed and asked about the claims that one of President Jimmy Carter's team saw classified pictures of a crashed saucer and military teams around it. There have been a number of claims of that kind. Do you know anything of the veracity of that?
I do. I can't talk about it, but there are individuals that have actually come through some very interesting, sensitive, classified documents on behalf of certain presidents. And, there's a lot of information there.
So there were some presidents who knew more than they were able to let on.
I think that's a safe assumption.
Isn't that interesting? Starting with one from Jonathan, who says, and I read this as well, Jim Green, ex-NASA chief scientist, reportedly said recently, well, he did say recently, that we will have an alien encounter within the next few years. Do you agree, says Jonathan?
I don't know if I can agree with a person. I can tell you that NASA is very much dedicating itself right now to this topic. You have the director of NASA himself, who is a former senator, who has said for the record that the topic of UAPs is a priority for them. And I think you did not hear this from me, but I think there may be some interesting announcements coming from NASA in the very near future regarding this topic that may be very, very promising for a lot of people.
And when you say some interesting announcements, just give me a clue. What do you think?
maybe dedicating some more resources and time and attention in a more formal and official capacity to this topic.
Because the new director has taken more of an interest.
The committee's first step was to release a preliminary report, which it did in June 2021. It said there are 144 credible reports of UAP sightings and could only explain one of them.
So this is a national security issue. Regardless of what we ultimately identify these aircraft or aerial phenomenon to be, we need to know.
This is Senator Christian Gillibrand, who led efforts alongside Senator Marco Rubio and Representative Ruben Gallego to include a UAP amendment in the latest defense bill.
We always need air dominance to defend this country. And to have UAPs that you just don't know what they are, you don't know if they're Chinese aircraft or Russian aircraft or truly unidentifiable, these are highly concerning issues.
Gilibrand is also concerned with how military personnel are treated when they report seeing something they can't explain.
They are either disbelieved or made fun of or marginalized in some way. And my job as chairwoman of the Personnel Subcommittee is to really put our service members first.
This isn't the first time the government has tried getting to the bottom of UFOs. Project Blue Book was the last attempt to investigate UFO sightings from 1947 to 1969. The Air Force collected over 12,000 reports, of which 701 remain unidentified. The program closed in 1969 and concluded that no UFO report was seen as a threat to national security. Yet, here we are again, over half a century later, with the same concerns. So, what's different this time? Well, in terms of evidence, we have more. In 2017, the New York Times published 3 videos recorded by Navy pilots that showed objects that seemed to defy the laws of physics. In 2020, the Pentagon confirmed these videos were real. What they were videos of, it doesn't know.
You want the best and the brightest figuring this out because it's an issue. And just putting your head in the sand and saying it doesn't exist is not an appropriate solution or approach. And since I have this role, I can at least mandate that the government start to do it in what I would imagine would be the right way, which is in a transparent, open, and accountable way.